Okay, hello, my name is Josh Davis and this is my research case study. I chose to do my project on Peter Jackson's negotiations to direct The Hobbit, and here is what I come up with for this. Okay, as a huge fan of The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and the Middle-earth franchise, I was extremely excited to see this option on our list of negotiations to discuss. I remember the rumors about the Hobbit movies that started almost immediately after the Lord of the Rings films were all released, and it seemed like the Hobbit was never going to be made into a film. Then again, like I said, I'm a huge fan, so I was very anxious. The man behind these films, of course, is Peter Jackson, and he is now considered one of the most popular filmmakers of this generation of cinema. Some of Jackson's fans may have suffered a bit of anxiety, myself included, for a couple of years when it seemed like he would not be tied to the planned Hobbit films when New Line Cinema, the studio that produced The Lord of the Rings, found themselves involved in a lawsuit with Jackson. According to Jackson, New Line committed fraud with subsidiary rights for The Lord of the Rings. According to the New York Times in 2005, the film trilogy had made around $4 billion. Peter Jackson was supposed to receive 20% of the gross revenue from the trilogy, excluding taxes. But according to his lawyers, Jackson only received about $200 million at the time. Due to these disagreements, the relationship between Jackson and New Line was strained. It looked as if Jackson would have no involvement with the planned Hobbit films. New Line was prepared to find new direction, but was unable to reach agreements with those that they approached. At the same time, despite the litigation, Peter Jackson still wanted to be involved with the project. After all, he was the one to envision this entire universe for the screen. This was the point where New Line and Peter Jackson had to negotiate. Jackson agreed to step in as the executive producer on the project, while the job of directing went to, I'm sorry, I can't really pronounce his name correctly, Guillermo del Toro. After several months of frustrating setbacks and a lot of uncertainty, Del Toro left the project before filming even began. It was then that Peter Jackson stepped up to once again direct for New Line. And this was not immediate. He still was unsure about if he wanted to do this or not. And it took a long time for him to step up and do it because for the longest time he still felt uncomfortable due to the lawsuit, and he just wasn't sure that he wanted to take on that role again. But when it seemed like the project really wasn't going to happen unless he took charge of it, he decided that it would be better for him to step up and do it and for it to happen than for it to not happen at all. And I found some resources that said that. It says, according to New Line president Toby Emmerich, it wasn't clear if the movies would survive if Jackson didn't step in, and certainly no one on the planet was better qualified to do it. The three negotiation techniques or concepts that I notice in this situation are these: BATNA, negative emotions, and separating the people from the problem. I think that New Line needed to consider what would happen to the films if they could not come to an agreement with Peter Jackson. The fans wanted Peter Jackson to head the project, and the films would probably have been considerably different than the original Lord of the Rings trilogy without his involvement. The third film from the trilogy, The Return of the King, which came out in 2003, won 11 Oscars, and you can see here Peter Jackson's holding his trophies. So New Line knew that Jackson would be the best option. To be honest, Peter Jackson didn't really even need to consider BATNA for himself, except for the fact that if he didn't make the agreement, he would be missing out on being a part of something that he had spent years working on, and that's including the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. It just wouldn't have been the same without his involvement. New Line was concerned about the negative emotions that could be present with Jackson working with them again. This is understandable after the lawsuit. I'm sure it would have made things very awkward. Both parties were able to separate the people from the problem. They considered what would be best for the project itself, the parties involved, and most importantly, in my very biased opinion, the fans. What went wrong was that the studios, if the allegations are true, New Line that is, played dirty tricks on Peter Jackson, and they did not give him his agreed share of the profits. This resulted in those negative feelings and caused a strain on the business relationship. This also caused a huge setback in getting the film started. It was good that these parties were able to come together and work through the problems to make the films happen, which is something that I am extremely grateful for.